Hello, I'm Nick Holt and welcome to this AMS podcast in partnership with SSAB. As the automotive industry works towards ambitious net zero targets, considerations around low carbon materials have now become very important across vehicle design and manufacturing. But how is the carbon footprint of these materials being validated and defined? Where are they being produced? And how much demand is there currently for these type of materials? To get some answers to these questions, I'm very pleased to be joined in this podcast by two industry experts. Nicholas Wahlberg, who's Vice President for System Solutions and Partnerships at Volvo Group, and Thomas Hornfelt, who's Vice President for Sustainable Business at the steelmaker SSAB. SSAB has produced and is selling its fossil-free steel in small volumes, which is also being used in limited series production by Volvo. So if I might start with you first, Nicholas, if that's okay. From Volvo Group point of view, from a customer's point of view, could you just give us some context around the demand from your customers for the vehicles for emission-free materials? I mean, how is that factoring into their decision-making process, and by extension, how is that informing your choices and operations?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that question, Nick. If I start in one end, the Volvo Group as a supplier of basically hardware today, but solutions tomorrow, have set our target to be a fossil-free group or company by 2040. And of course, the start of that journey is mainly connected to our big emissions are when our products are used. So we're spending a lot of efforts to transform from combustion engine technologies into electric driveline systems, both battery electric and hydrogen electric. But with that said, we're not done with just converting the driveline, because we're also serious in the matter of becoming totally CO2 free by 2040. And that means that we need to find the ways to get all material needed to build a truck or an excavator or a hauler by CO2 free materials. And as steel is a major part of our products, we have started from our perspective in that end, and we were very happy when we had the first meetings with SSAB a couple of years ago now, as they are first in the world to introduce technologies that could meet this demand. So we're very serious about it, and we have signed up to the Science-Based Targets Agreement, and we know that a number of our customers and customers' customers and the whole system is on this journey. I've understood that we need to change the world really from a climate perspective, and thereby are more and more looking through their purchasing of machinery and solutions, and the fossil freedom comes up in many of these discussions today.
So thank you, Nicholas. Thomas, coming to you from a supplier point of view, the demand is there for low CO2 materials, and companies like Volvo, they've got very ambitious targets to meet sort of net zero across the board. In terms of bringing a material to a client, SSAB, well-proven steel provider, the grades, the performance is there. But in terms of the, in this instance, the fossil-free and the zero steel products, can you sort of describe how you're clarifying the certification and the labelling of those products? So can you give me a little insight into those products and how you're presenting them to customers like Volvo?
Well, when it comes to certification and labeling, I think one of the weaknesses of the steel industry, or the steel community, if you will, is that there is no widely recognized definition of, for lack of a better word, what green steel is. We have been very strict on using the term fossil-free steels, because that's what our steels are. They are steels made without fossil CO2 emissions, period. And our SSAB Zero product is a scrap-based product with zero CO2 emissions. That's it. And we're also very careful with using third-party reviewed environmental product declarations and to be very transparent to Volvo and other customers about what we're actually doing and what the production chain looks like and so on. And now, when we're having our pilot plant up and running, and with Volvo, I'm very proud to say that we have limited serial production using these steels already today, so that they are really both available, verified from a technological point of view, and a proof of concept of what we can be doing in the future. And I think that is the main point. And I think that goes for the industry in general, that what we need isn't necessarily more labeling, but more transparency. As Niklas said, the demand is out there, and what we need to do is to make it easy for our customers and their end users to make the right decision. Simple as that. There are initiatives out there. There is something called the product environmental footprint within the EU. The IRA in the US is in the process of setting targets for what is acceptable and so on also. But I think we will have to live with a rather wide set of schemes, certifications, labels, whatever. So it really, again, boils down to transparency, to give a number and give people the freedom to choose.
And I think Thomas is the expert in this, of course, compared to me. But I also, from an analogy point of view, in the car and heavy-duty vehicle industry, we've been working on certifications and so on, how to measure emissions for 100 years or so. And it's, of course, it takes time to harmonize systems. And we still, we still talk about Euro 6, 7 European measurements of emissions for vehicles and other measurements in the US. So we still haven't a global measurement for something we've been working on for a very long time. So I appreciate that it will take some time in the steel industry as well, but it's important to drive these questions to, as Thomas says, to make it simpler for customers like Volvo to understand what is what in this field of different acronyms and solutions.
Nicholas, has it been a challenge with the products that you're producing and selling, in the sense that from a supply chain transparency requirement, which has become increasingly important now, and as Thomas has raised there, and you've agreed with, this lack of kind of standardization, if you like, and obviously regional differences, has that been a challenge when you are presenting a product and its CO2 footprint in production and operation to some degree? Has that been a challenge around that? Or do customers understand that there are a myriad of different standards, might be the wrong word, but certifications and requirements that might be based on regionality or the way that certain things are being measured? Did they understand that? And is it a challenge for you when you're dealing with your customers?
If we look at it from the fossil-free steel example now, like Thomas said, we have been able, in our partnership SSAB and Volvo, to start what we call a limited serial production, as the quantities of available material is quite low yet. And we have made decisions within Volvo to focus on the European sales so far, and in a very limited amount. So we have not confronted the world with the regional differences and so on. And so far, we only have one company who can supply this type of steel, and that is SSAB. So there hasn't been anything real to compare with, to be honest. So I think we have that stage in front of us when other colleagues to Thomas in the steel business starts to come to the market with these sort of products with their versions of it and so on. That's when the confusion in the Volvo end will start, so to say, for real.
And I guess also one thing is, for Volvo being a large company, competent staff, a lot of experience to make this decision. The next is to transfer it to your customers and end users also. I mean, we have been able in the last couple of years, maybe the last 10 years, to have environmental product declarations, and these days they are third-party review. But we have one process. We have a handful of raw materials. I have the utmost respect for a company like Volvo having to make some kind of declaration for a huge number of vehicles that are very much configurable. Also, if you talk about trucks, with dozens of suppliers, not of raw materials as we have, but of rather complex equipment.
And given that, as you said, the volumes are quite low at the moment, the volumes are still, I know from Thomas, are relatively low at the moment. Demand is increasing, and you're focusing on Europe. From both of your point of view, is it good to establish, let's say, a European focus, a European base around those kind of certifications and the presentation of it, so that if you can get standardization across the European suppliers, then it provides a good base when you're, as a company, Nicholas, looking, and actually SSAB, when you're looking globally, you've got something there you can say this is approved across the EU or wider Europe, an accepted standard now. And when you're presenting that to the US or to Asia or somewhere like that kind of supports your requirements and your statements around low CO2 footprints. So is it good to have that sort of focus at the minute, small scale, if you like, relatively, to around the sort of focus around those European requirements?
Yeah, if I start, Thomas, in one sense, I agree with you. But on the other hand, I mean, this transition must happen quite quickly and globally. So I think we have to be prepared. And as Volvo is a global company, I for sure know, of course, that SSAB has operations in the US and so on. We have to start the journey all over the place. And many of what you refer to the European industry, but I mean, many of those companies are also global and happen to have steel mills and so on in Europe, but also in other places in the world. So I think we have to be realistic and of course see that the European Union will have one discussion. There will be another one in the US and so on. And if we can harmonize as much as possible, it's good. But not to lose time, I think we have to be all over the place at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that generally speaking, start with the low-hanging fruits and get a few companies going in one market that will have a pull effect for other markets, for other companies. So I think you have a point. We shouldn't necessarily make things overly complicated, but start with the things that we can do and then take it from there.
And something that was brought to my attention by SSAB is that even though they've been a long time supplier with various clients and customers for steels in their vehicles, whatever they might be, truck, cars, standards are required when RFQs are going in and what you expect the performance of those materials to be. Because the production process differs, but not the end material, but SSAB have been asked for different validation or further validation of those materials. Nicholas, is that something that Volvo have requested or you're aware of? Is that something that occurs? And do you see that challenge being overcome, in the near future? Do you see a greater acceptance of the steel as the same performance, regardless of the raw material necessarily or the process material that is involved?
No, I think that is something I've learned. We have done for ages, so to say, is of course that when we work with a company like SSAB, we of course have our experts internally who wants to audit or have the dialogues with, in this case, SSAB, to understand the process, so we're aware of what we're buying, so to say. And what I think we're seeing now is also like we're proving in one sense for the fossil-free steel in the value chain together with SSAB that we also have to look all along the value chain, from the mine over to the steel mill to the end production of vehicles. So we sort of work together along a value chain to sort out both the climate questions, but also if there is any process steps that needs support. But we want to engage and understand as much as possible in order, from one perspective, to in the end buy the right product, so to say. So yes, we are always engaging in these sort of discussions with companies like SSAB.
Yeah. And Thomas, as I say, I think the comment came from some of your colleagues, and I think you mentioned it as well, that the need for a company like SSAB to support its customers around this area as well, because obviously adding more steps of, for want of a better term, auditing or bureaucracy into a process that's kind of ongoing is quite challenging. So, Thomas, I mean, is that something you're working on with? Your customers are generally long established as well, so there is a great deal of cooperation and trust anyway with them. But is it something you're working towards to try and a hurdle you're trying to get past, shall I say?
I wouldn't say that it's a hurdle. We have rather well-established procedures for this. But again, I think it's part of that transparency that is so important. I mean, if we have a smallish hurdle, it is, of course, in a transition period. I mean, you need a somewhat stable production system in order to have transparency. Also, it is in that transition period. But I mean, then we're talking about less than a year, really. And again, as long as you can show Volvo and other customers that this is where we are today, this is the stuff that we're changing in order to arrive to here, I really don't see that as a big issue. I mean, one thing maybe to be a bit detail focused that could be worth mentioning is that Volvo and others have very high quality demands, and also from a process point of view. I mean, the CO2 or other emissions aside, we need to have quality assurance as well, and that is very often based on a fixed production route, a fixed location, a fixed procedure. And now we are going to change our way of doing things, which means that this production route will be changed. And then I think it's important to have an ongoing dialogue about how you do that together and make sure that our customers are comfortable with what we're going to do. For example, if we're changing the iron making part of our business, the upstream part, that's kind of changing a raw material supplier. It's not that big a deal for the end result. But if we're changing the atmospheric conditions in a heating furnace somewhere towards the last production step, that maybe that is something that will affect surface quality or whatever, where we need to work closer together. So to identify these areas and to identify where do we have the needs for also customer audits and customer approvals to be adjusted as part of this transition. Because again, Niklas has dozens of, or probably thousands of suppliers to deal with, and a few of them are making steel like us, but we're also making a large number of different steel products. So it becomes, I think, a bottleneck for both of us to get this through, to be honest. And that is something, again, where we need to work together. So it is to have this value chain thinking and to have really a partnership approach to this is so crucial for making this happen as part of a value chain towards that so important end user.
I was just to emphasize also, as you said, the quality is very important, Thomas. And of course, now when these new ways of both producing iron, as you said, Thomas, and maybe changes downstream as well in your operation, it is very important for us to be able to guarantee the quality on our products in the end. Will it really last as long as we think, and so on? So thereby this sort of partnership is so important, to understand it down on an atomic level together, to really see that we can bring this to the market in high volumes and guarantee that this is at least as good as the material would have been used for 100 years, and perhaps even better.
And you mentioned the value chains and the working together. Obviously, you have processes that you've well established over the years, but are you finding that there is a requirement to maybe adjust those processes a little more, to communicate slightly differently, to speed up this sort of understanding validation process? Is the relationship becoming a lot closer now with suppliers and clients? I mean, I'll come to you, Niklas, first on that.
Yeah, I would say coming closer, and a new dimension of collaboration or partnership within a value chain, because you need to be much more open and, of course, keep the business side of things legal and transparent and good in all ways. But on the other hand, this new way of collaborating very much closer on bringing these new type of materials to the market, it requires a new level of engagement between the actors in the value chain. And I don't, as it is in many cases, no one has all answers, but the combined knowledge of people, in this case between SSAB and Volvo, well, together we know a lot more than the individual company. And if we then add in more partners along the value chain, we know even better together. And there are things that, not on the property side of the material, but to make this happen, where we can unitely drive questions to get both politicians and regulatory instances on to promote this transformation rather than oppose it.
And Thomas, is again that relationship with your clients beyond, Volvo and beyond, is that changing? Is it getting closer as a result of these requirements?
Yeah, it is, and it has to be. And maybe I'm oversimplifying, but I'm falling back to this production audit thing that we have going on today. Today, Volvo and other customers, they come to our plant, they look at it and say, okay, this makes sense to us, we're good to go. But it's a one-shot deal because our plant has looked the same for many, many years. And then when you validate a new product, you do it again. But now I think just for resource reasons, what is going to happen is that you will have to revalidate a small part of that process rather than this total picture all the time. So you have to be much more flexible and kind of update your approvals rather than redo them, so to say. So you really have to, again, have that dialogue about what you're doing, what is going to change, what are we doing. But I think as part of the partnership that we have with Volvo and some other customers, where we really are open about where we're going and what we want to do together, we have started that process already. I mean, we are talking rather detailed about what we're doing, what is going to change, and so on.
I just want to move on to something else, just a bit more about some of the transparency across steel production processes. EPDs, are they offering more transparency for you? Is it something that, is it a tool you use? How do they feature into this discussion?
It is one instrument that is reasonably standardized, and it's one tool for our customers to make informed decisions. I think it's one part of transparency. Ours are third-party verified, and there are, like I said, standards for this. So from that point of view, it's a very trustworthy document. Still, as a steel buying customer, you have to be able to read the small print, because just in the beginning there is a listing of the assumptions that are being made and so on. And those can differ between different steel makers, actually. So it's also here, there is a saying that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and it's the same thing here. You need to look at the total picture in order to have that. But once you do that, it's a very good instrument, certainly.
Do you agree with that, Nicholas? Are they something you can use when you're making your materials choices, or choices around other products even?
Yeah, I'm not daily into it, but I know we're using them, and that it, of course, supports. But I do think that we need to continue to develop the transparency even further, and to sort of find some way how we express the wordings as well in the names or the different variants coming across, because of course there is a branding perspective, but we have to be transparent so we know what does it mean really, because our customers read it, and how do we explain the differences between this and that? Is one of them better than the others, and in that case, in what aspect? But I mean, the end goal is zero. But on the way to zero, we will have these different variants, I'm sure, going forward. But I think we can do more, both in the steel industry and together with customers like Volvo to support even further transparency.
It's great insights from you both. Thank you. I'm always intrigued by the levels of complexity that go on in the supply chains, and the need for standardisation across this is very revealing in a way, given that there's so much onus on it at the moment, and yet some of the things that should be foundational to it are not quite there. But obviously, you guys are instrumental in helping to make that happen. So thanks very much for your time. Much appreciated. It's been very interesting talking to you. So thank you. This was an AMS podcast in partnership with SSAB. Thanks for listening.